Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
In 2005, caught in a spiral of urban decay and falling population, Kalamazoo, yes, it's a real place, embarked on a bold experiment to save itself. It would give local students free college tuition. You mean that there's people that have already done this? Yes. You mean that there's cities in the U.S. that have already done this? Yes, that's what I mean. Why are we talking about this? Well, if you know anything about a lot of the Democratic platform this year and what many of those candidates, not all of them, but many of those candidates are running on, has some variation of free or reduced college tuition. So one of the reasons we're talking about this is we want to explore the legitimacy of this option. Is it a possibility? And are there places that have already done it? Well, Kalamazoo, Michigan is one of them, and that's what we're going to look at. But before we get started, we couldn't begin a conversation on Kalamazoo and college tuition without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Actually been to Kalamazoo and one of their schools.
Yeah?
A couple of times, yeah.
Wonder where that name came from.
I don't know.
That's
our senior historian doesn't know.
I would think it's a Michigan. It's an Indian name, most likely.
That's where I was going
from an Indian.
I'll Google it. I'll get back to you.
Excellent. See, that's why we got a producer, right?
Okay.
Is to find out.
I thought he's supposed to be seen and not heard, though.
Well,
and he's supposed to just look that up and.
You know, he's got control over whether or not we're heard, so I think he can pipe in.
I can mute you at any time, Lance.
Lance hates it.
No, it's fine with me. I don't care.
He'll talk anyway. It won't matter if he's muted or not. He'll just keep going. He'll run over here, steal my mic, and start talking in it. So
I'm not the one who looks bad if I'm muted. I mean, this is was glancing through and just kind of perusing and found this thing, and it's an interesting concept, and it brought up a lot of things that I hadn't thought about when you and I have debated this issue before. So I think it's important, hopefully it brings, and it's not really to draw, and we won't cover enough, I know, in a half an hour. So hopefully we get some real feedback on this, because we're not going to cover all the reasons why people think this is a good idea, nor are we trying to say that this is a bad idea. We're just saying if you put it in a microscope and put it in one town who had these situations and had this dilemma,
what do we get? Here's
what happened. It doesn't mean that this would happen if we went, made it a national campaign and all that kind of stuff, but it is still interesting to see. So go ahead.
So this is from the Wall Street Journal, weekend edition, and it explains that the program actually went into effect about 30 years ago. It's funded by anonymous donors. So this is a key in this particular instance. There are more than 300 U.S. cities, though, that are experimenting with some version of this. So some of them are not going the route of private funding for it. They're going the route of public city funding for it. We're looking at an instance where private donors have decided to fund this. So in other words, we're looking at the city has no financial stake per se, right? They're not laying out the money for this, and neither are the taxpayers. So in a system where the costs are covered, which of course is a dream situation on a national scale, okay? But in the dream situation, does it really work? And like a lot of things that we take on, you're probably going to discover depends on how you measure if it's working.
What's your definition of success?
That's right. So 13 years ago, it was put into effect in Kalamazoo. Some results are in. College enrollment has risen. Kalamazoo's economy is stronger, and so is a sense of community in a city that once had nearly lost hope. Yet, city leaders have found the benefits of the Kalamazoo Promise, as the free college plan is known, only go so far. So testing the promise, we're going to talk about the percentage of Kalamazoo students who earned a bachelor's degree within 6 years of high school graduation in 2003 to 2005 before the, quote, promise free tuition plan and in 2006 to 2012. So before the program, 27% overall were earning a bachelor's degree. After the program, 30%. So a 3% increase. So, I mean, it got better. Didn't get a lot better.
It's a 10% increase.
27
to 30 is a 10% increase.
Yeah. So, I mean,
again, what do you want to make the number say?
Yeah. It's, when you say 27 to 30, it's like, well, that's not very much. When you say a 10% increase, sounds like a lot more. For white students, it was 37% before. It's now 46%. So a pretty sizable increase. For black students, it was about 14%. It is still about 14%. So, not working so well for them. Mid to high income, it was at 38%, now at 49%. So a very substantial increase. For lower income, it was at 10%. It's now at 14%. For women, it was at 28%. It's now at 33%. And for men, it was at 27%, and it's still at 27%. So if you're black, or if you're a male, or if you're low income, it's not doing a whole lot for those demographic areas. It is doing the most for white, middle, high income women. That's who it's doing the most for, is one of those segments. Not necessarily a combination of those segments, one of those particular segments. So the answer here, Lance, as we go through this, Kalamazoo, for what it's worth, is a city of 77,000, which is 2 hours west of Detroit. Naturally, like many towns in the area, it was supported by factories throughout the 1900s, producing checker cabs, Gibson guitars, paper products, and medical devices. General Motors actually had a plant on the outskirts of town, and there was a local pharmaceutical company. The population began to shrink in the 1970s as some of the white families headed for the suburbs and factories hurt by globalization closed or moved. GM shut down its plant in the 1990s. Pfizer bought up the local pharmaceutical company and downsized it. By the early 2000s, building downtown sat empty and the schools suffered along with the tax base. So Kalamazoo was in a bad way. Headed downhill fast. And they looked at, well, what can we do? And city leaders and these private donors said, let's get together and invest in education because that will fix our problems. Now, what they have seen, as highlighted before, is they have seen an improvement in the economy, some improvement in wages. They've seen more people move to the area. So there have been some very positive things happening as a result of this. Because naturally, you can imagine if you're a city and you proclaim, if you come here and you get your kids started in kindergarten, if they stay in state and go to a public institution, their tuition is free. That sounds pretty good. Mm-hmm. It's about as good a deal as they come.
Well, you might even take less in income.
Right.
Because of the payoff at the end.
Because you still might actually
you don't have
to
come up with, $100,000 plus $200,000 for a child's education.
Or like Sherry and Richard Walsh, Kalamazoo parents of 2 young children, they'd been looking to move into a bigger home in the suburbs. Instead, they stayed in Kalamazoo and spent $30,000 investing in their home, upgrading their 1930s house to make it more modern. So there's an example of now we don't have to spend this money. So now we're going to take this $30,000 we had in savings for college and invest it here locally, right? Make our property more value, pay more in property tax because of it. So it's better for them, better for the city. So there's a lot of things that happened that, generally speaking, made Kalamazoo better. Did the population get more educated? Did the population actually go out and start getting higher paying jobs because they went to college for free? The answer, generally speaking, is not really. Yes, but very marginally. Right. Not the type of increase you would anticipate with a free college program. So the reason, hopefully, that you all are seeing that this is very interesting is, as we highlighted before, Lance, this is the dream scenario, right? Because the taxpayers are not funding this.
Right.
The city's not funding it. It's coming as a gift. And yet, so there's no financial burden. Right.
Manna from heaven.
And they're anonymous donors too. We're talking about almost as pure as it gets, right? We're giving the money and we don't want to be identified. And they go so far as to go through a third party person so that the donors won't be identified. So it's a complete gift. And yet what's happened, very interestingly, is the housing market, the wages, and the economy of the city, they've all gotten better. There's more people now. Population is stabilizing. But the education of the community hasn't really changed very much. It's changed a little bit. And it's done almost nothing for those that are the most disadvantaged. It's done nothing from an education standpoint for those that are most disadvantaged. It's done something for the whole community by improving the economy. So this, I think, is the part that's the really interesting part. And that's why I want to get to, what do you make of this, Lance? I mean, they're talking about free college at the national level a lot right now. And this is the key, right? This is the thing. We do this and everything's great. Everything's dandy.
But in Kalamazoo, it didn't bring back new businesses. Home starts went up, building construction, people invested in the community. But the bottom line becomes, and this is where we've talked time and time again, okay, if I go to college and I train for this job, does my hometown have that job? And like you said, they could go anywhere to go to school. University of Michigan, Michigan State, Eastern, Western Michigan, community college, wherever they wanted to go. When they got that degree, did Kalamazoo have a job waiting for them? And if I was satisfied with my life in Kalamazoo anyway, and the job I wanted didn't require a college education, why would I go to college if it's not free? I mean, even if it's free, why would I go if what I want to do in my life and to be happy doesn't mean I have to spend 5 or 6 years of my life in a classroom?
Because everybody else is doing it.
Why would I do it? Right. Because
I mean, there's a girl in this article, just for what it's worth, who said that very thing.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't want to.
No. And I was leading to that, but then when they go, they're like, oh, this is not what I want. I don't like it. This isn't making me happy. This isn't going to get me to my happy place in life. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to use it. You know what I mean? It's that whole thing we've talked about before. Education is wonderful. Just to learn something, to broaden your horizons, to broaden your mind. But I want to say this, it's not that if it doesn't lead to a better paying job, it wasn't worth it. It is. But what are you going to do with this when you get done? At least these people weren't taking on tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt when they got done and realized college wasn't for them, or the job that they want to spend time in that makes them happy or earns them money didn't require a college education. And that's the dilemma we have, I think, in the United States right now, is that everybody thinks if they go to college, they're going to get this great paying job. Well, it depends on what field you go into. There are a lot of fields that don't pay a lot of money, even though they require a college education. There are, there people say, I don't want to travel the country or the world. I like where I live and I want to be close to mom and dad and grandma. And so I go off and I get this degree and then I come back home and, well, there's no job for me in this town with the degree I have. So now what do I do? So now I've got all this debt. I've got this degree, but I'd rather be close to family than work in the field that I trained in or was educated in.
So I've got all this debt.
So now I have,
or in this case, I have none, but I took 4 to 6 years of my life to do this. So we're going to continue this conversation about the mixed bag of whether or not it worked for Kalamazoo, and not being facetious about that either. I mean, it really is a mixed bag because it definitely made certain things better. Did it make the things that Kalamazoo was after better? Not quite, or not maybe to the extent that they would have liked.
Again, how do you define success?
Exactly.
I mean, education didn't go down.
Right. It did go up.
And in the direction the city was going, it very well could have gone down. Had they not done this, there would have been no gains and there might have been more losses, than they had already experienced through the 80s and the 90s.
So there's that other side too of, they had to do something and this is what they chose to do. The question is, when we broaden out, which is what we'll do in a moment, what does that mean on a national level? What does that mean from a financing standpoint? We'll talk about all of that, but before we do, Lance, why are we having this conversation? What are we trying to accomplish here at TrueChat?
Well, we're here to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
Man, made it easy today. Got them checked off, right in order, read off the poster and everything.
Trying to keep my boss happy.
Okay. might dock your pay, right? Got to be careful. So we're going to
take one of those zeros away.
We're going to continue on our conversation about this. But before we do, we're going to take a break to hear from one of our sponsors. Welcome back. Kalamazoo tries free tuition. What does it mean for the nation? This was originally reported by the Wall Street Journal, just again, in case you want to look it up. We've talked some about Kalamazoo's specific situation, and Lance, tell me if you disagree with the conclusion, but I'd say, did things stabilize / get better from an education standpoint? Yes. And if you're talking about improving, then marginally, so they definitely stabilized and they did get better. I mean, it's irrefutable. You can see the data. It did get better overall. It didn't get much better for those that are the most disadvantaged, which is too bad. But it didn't get worse either. And Kalamazoo, again, as we highlighted, was on a downward trajectory. So it definitely helped in education, albeit probably not as much, I think, as they would like for it to be helping. And it certainly helped from a Kalamazoo economy standpoint as a city, getting people to invest in their homes, making the economy overall stronger, getting people to stay there, parents, that type of thing. So it helped, but I think it helped in other ways more than it did from an education
standpoint. Did the article, and I don't remember when I scanned it, did the article say how many people took advantage and went to college? I know it gives the graduation rate, over a 6-year period and all of that. But how many people took it? Were there a higher number of people who at least tried the college experience because it was free?
So I don't have the exact. They mentioned that more people have tried.
I know there was some anecdotal evidence, talking to individuals.
But
over the overall numbers, I don't remember seeing anything. Because that's a positive.
Yes.
There's something about if you come from a family who never attended college and you attended some, and because of the economic situation at home, let's face it, just college tuition is very expensive, but that's not the only cost you have of going to college.
Right.
If you have to still put food in people's mouths, if you still have to pay the rent, if you still have to make a car payment, yes, not having to pay for your tuition or not having a huge debt to pay when you get out is very helpful. But it still doesn't pay the monthly rent, doesn't pay the mortgage, it doesn't pay for the groceries. So there's a lot of reasons why people drop out of college. It's not because they want to or whatever. Those are some of them. But that's what I think is the problem. But there is something experiential in having been for a while.
Sure.
You can talk about it.
Yes.
Because you did it, and you didn't see it through to graduation because your life took a different turn.
I don't regret those 2 years.
But there were still things you learned by doing that nobody can ever take away from you, that you will be able to pass on to other young people should you ever decide to go down that route, to be responsible for some young people that you're going to rear and to educate and everything else. So not all of the value is just, how many more people graduated? If more people attended and got the experience, that could pay off down the road as well.
Yes. I'll say this, hopefully, as because
and to sum it up, the article really didn't say.
Right.
I didn't remember reading anything. So the article really doesn't say, but that's something that I could argue that, if more attended, that's a positive step. There are things that can happen in a positive manner for the next generation because more in this generation at least attended.
Well, because there's a lot of things that college enables other than just what you're learning in the classroom. In fact, I think there's a lot of people, and I might be one of them, that would argue the other things that you're doing in college might even be more valuable. It depends. Again, it's different for everybody. I learned a lot in the classroom, and I liked a lot of what I learned. I also was forced to take classes again that I got. Nothing isn't a fair assessment, because I don't think that if you're in a class, at least in good faith, that you get nothing. I got probably very little relative to what I could have been getting if I had been doing something else, experience-wise. What I got outside of class, in the groups that I was involved in, the things that I was doing, the new experiences, the new people that I was meeting, that, looking back, was more valuable to me. That was more worth it than just some of the hard knowledge that I learned.
Well, especially when you think of the traditional college student between the ages of 18 and 24. That's a time of huge personal growth.
Yes.
And decision making.
Yes.
So you're going to have that anyway, but if you have it in the college environment, it's a different experience than if you have it another way. And I will say that as someone who did it both ways.
Right.
Because I went to college for 2 years and then I dropped out and got married and then went back.
Yes.
And I know that those two stints in college were two very different stints. You know,
different perspectives.
My 18 to 20-year-old years in college and my 22 to 24-year-old years in college, two totally different experiences.
I will say too, because I think it's important for people to know. So I started as a full-time, very traditional 15, 20 credit hours a semester. So a little maybe
away from home.
Yes. Away from home, living on campus, like very, very, very standard, nothing terribly strange. And then, so I left, basically I was technically probably somewhere in between a sophomore and junior. So even though I had been there I was basically 2.5 years of school, right? So not exactly a junior, or sort of a junior.
Depending on how many credit hours you took and all that kind of stuff.
But the point is, in the second half of my time, I was actually in part of the weekend degree program, and technically a still full-time student, but doing a lot of what the part-time students did. And I was spending time with people who were in their 30s, 40s, even their 60s and 70s. There were some really old people going back to school.
Hey, I got you. I know.
Yeah, super old. Because 60s and 70s are really old. I guess it's old to be going back to school, put it that way. Not necessarily old as in old, but. Even
though we old people like to learn too.
Yeah. But part of what you got from that was seeing that just different life experiences. The experience that I had, even though I was on the same campus in some of the same classrooms I'd been in, on the weekend with these people, and how that class went was very different than how it went when I was just a full-time undergrad with the rest of my class. And I think that was valuable. But again, this pulls back to what I've said a lot of times on my perspective on higher education, which is society loves simple answers. We all like that, right? We all want 2 + 2 is 4, man. And we feel good about that, right? We want to believe, we want it to be easy, because it gets complicated when it's complicated, and that's not fun.
Now you're describing the 45-minute pre-show meeting we had today.
That's right. That's right. Our producer can speak to that. It can be uncomfortable when we approach situations and we don't have either all the necessary data, or we realize that we don't understand it as well as we thought we did. And I think that's what Kalamazoo is showing us. They thought, we've got a failing city, and the way to fix this is free college. It helped. It hasn't fixed it. And it definitely hasn't fixed it for those that are in the worst shape, which are the ones, of course, that we want to be the most focused, or should want to be the most focused on helping. So that, to me, speaks to this larger thing that I've said before, which is, I am not against college, okay? No, I went, right? I went to college, okay? And I would go back. If time was unlimited and there were 10 of me, one of me would probably spend the rest of my life in school because I enjoy it. So I'm not down on it at all. And like I said, I wouldn't not have gone for the 2 years that I went. Those were very valuable. I feel like they were worth. Were they worth as much as was paid? Maybe not, but they were worth, they were worth something. They were worth money. They were worth paying for. So with that said, I think the problem is not that we shouldn't tell people they should go to college. We shouldn't make the mistake of believing that college is your free pass to success in life. It is not. And the data continues to reinforce that. With the more people that go to college, the more true it keeps becoming. Okay? That's the reality. And if you take a few minutes to look at the data, that's what it tells us. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go to college. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is if you've been told, if you're out there and you've been told, or if you're telling other people, you got to get to college and then everything's fine. Or if you're saying something like that, or if you're leading people to believe that, you got to stop. We need you to stop. It ain't going to work. And that's part of what frustrates me with a lot of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side right now. And yes, so all of you out there listening who think that Lance and I never hate on the Democrats and we're just, wild-eyed liberals, I'm letting you know it makes me very upset when I hear them talk about this, acting like that's the thing that's going to fix the poverty problem in this nation. It won't. It will make it a little better. It won't fix it. Okay? It won't fix it because it just doesn't. It's one piece of a much greater puzzle. And the more people that go to college, the more data we have that continues to reinforce that. People graduate with more and more debt for fields that don't pay all that very much money. They all think that they can get the best job in their field, which isn't how that works. If there's 100 of us that all get the same degree, we can't all be the best at it. There can only be one or two, that are at the very top tier echelon.
Yep.
Even though we all got the same degree.
Yep.
So I think that's part of why Lance and I talk about this as much as we do, is trying to make sure people get it's not as cut and dry as the Democrats, most of them, are trying to make it out to be. In fairness, there are some who are they're not exactly saying free college for all is a bad idea, but they're saying that's not what I would do.
Well, it's not the be all end all.
No, it's not. And it doesn't, we're led to believe it fixes more than it actually fixes. And Kalamazoo's proves that.
On the flip side, just to hold into the redneck liberal here.
Yes.
Is not a bad idea. I mean, it's not something that won't help things.
Especially in a Kalamazoo situation where it's free.
But it's not the panacea.
Right.
It's not that one size fits all and this will solve every ill in America. It's like I would like to see more in how did the article didn't go into what happened to the crime rate.
Yeah.
The juvenile crime rate, because people were, what happened to the unemployment rate, all of which there are other factors. Before you start flooding the email box, there's the Twitter box. There are other factors besides
your daughter's going to be giving you a call.
Yeah. Besides, that's what I'm thinking of. There are other factors involved in those numbers as well. Mm-hmm. But we all know if you get people in school and you keep them active, then those are other things that can get better as well.
Yes.
So it's still, I think, to me, it's a big question mark on, whether, as you're saying, colleges I agree with all of those things, but to whether or not this is a good idea or not, still a lot of question marks. Kalamazoo didn't really give us an answer. It didn't give us a definitive answer.
In their situation, I think it was.
On what's good or bad. And I think, right.
But they got it for
I think
free.
Everybody's surprised. We were both surprised. I shouldn't say everybody. We were both surprised at the minimal gains and who gained and who didn't.
Right.
And again, you keep throwing it out there and it's very true. There were no tax dollars involved.
Yes.
In this experiment.
Which I think is a big caveat.
That's the big thing right there. That's the issue.
I'm all for, I don't want anybody to take away. If somebody came to Urbana, which is where Lance and I are recording from, and there were some donors that wanted to do this, sure. Why would you say, why would you say no? It would kind of be silly to say no. So I think, I don't think that Kalamazoo made a short-sighted decision by accepting whoever these very generous individuals are that have decided to invest $124 million in tuition for some 5,735 students. Okay. That's not by any means downplaying this lovely gift that they're providing. Whether or not that money could have been spent in a way that helped more, that's a complicated conversation, It probably could have been. I don't know offhand what that is, but there's probably a way it could have been better spent. But again, if somebody comes, you don't look the gift horse in the mouth. It's, this is a very nice gift. And I think that if the nation was being offered this, sure, but that's not what we're being offered, just to be clear. What we're talking about at the national level, it's not free college. Okay?
Right.
It's not free. I don't care if you I love Bernie too, guys. Okay. I love Bernie. I don't like a lot of what he says, just to be clear. He's hard not to like, right? He's an old grandpa dude. Like, even Caleb might be begrudged to say that Bernie's a funny little dude that is hard to not like. You might not like what he says, but he's,
He's so cute talking about his socialist ideas on the stage.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Look at him.
With his hair and everything, and his fingers.
You don't know what you're doing. Of course you do.
Well, I think he knows.
Better than putting tanks down the Capitol.
All right. No, let's not start.
It was my turn to open the can of worms. I'm sorry.
Yes, apparently. My point there is just that they're billing it, and this really frustrates me with all of the Democrats. I'm not just on Bernie. All of the Democrats who bill it as free college for all. It isn't free. It's not free. Sorry. It's not. Sorry that I yelled, but it's not free. Okay? We still have to pay for it. Just because you don't get the bill from the college doesn't mean it isn't free. Just because you don't have a loan it's still loaned. The government's loaning the money. You're going to pay the taxes that repay it. It's not free.
Exactly right.
It's not free. Somebody's got to pay it at some point.
Right.
Just like this whole just forgive all the student debt thing. It sounds lovely, Lance, but it's not forgiven. The government then just takes it on, which is just us taking it on in a different context. It all makes us feel better. Sorry. Makes me want to rip my hair out when I hear these Democrats say that stuff. And some of them I do like some of the other things they say, but this is not one of them.
Right.
Because they're selling you a false promise. It is. It's the same thing that frustrates me with Trump selling this false promise that life in America will be better if we keep out immigrants. It's not true. It's just not true. The data that's not how it works.
And if we give the tax cut, it will help the deficit, and the deficit has gone through the roof.
Right. It's just some of these things.
What they say and the facts don't match.
Yes.
On both sides.
On both sides. And that's what I'm getting on the Democrats for today is it just isn't true. It's a lie. So don't believe it. You can still want it. Just don't believe that what they're telling you is true. It won't be free, and it won't just go away. It'll just look like it's free. It'll just look like it disappeared. And maybe that's good enough for you. And
are you standing on a Dove box or a Zest box or what?
I don't know.
What brand of soap are you standing on right now?
I use Dove.
You use Dove. Okay.
I use Dove. What about you, Lance? Soap?
I don't believe in soap.
Oh, okay.
I just wait till it rains and I run out there.
Rinse off in the rain. All right.
When you're an old curmudgeon who doesn't want people around, that's one way I found you can keep them out.
Sorry. Lance was riled up earlier today. This one gets me riled up.
And I just,
what gets me riled up, Lance, is not this. What gets me riled up is when people lie. That's what gets me riled up. Okay. I don't like it. I don't like when people try to boil it down and make it too simple because they don't want to open their mind to realize that it's more complicated than what they're making it out to be.
Human nature is that we want to trust people and believe people.
Yep.
It's like our producer looked at me and he says, why do you always get uptight about things? Well, because I'm one of the whatever percentage that totally question everything that's said. That's not the majority of human nature.
No.
The majority of human nature is we take people at face value. We trust what they say is true and we don't question it and we go on. And that's why you're so frustrated is that people have found a way to get in power by not telling the truth and then messes everybody up.
By taking advantage of your better nature.
Right.
And I mean you at home, us, Lance and I, Caleb. Okay. That's what should upset you.
We believe them because we want to believe them.
Because we want to believe them. Exactly. And that's not why you should believe them. I don't want you to lose your good nature and be cynical, but I'm hoping that part of why you listen to our program is because you can see that Lance and I can still be positive and believe there are answers without accepting the crap that people try to feed us because they think that we can't handle more than that. And you can. If you're listening, you can handle it. That's why you're listening, hopefully. Thank you. Let us know your thoughts at TrueChat.org. We want to know. Yes, Lance? We really do.
Yes, we do.
That's part of this.
Mm-hmm. Get a hold of us.
Be kind of foolish if
that's right.
If we
like the interaction.
We like it.
We want to know what the audience is thinking, good or bad.
That's right. And you might even be Might even be asked to be on a show at some point.
Very good.
That has happened before.
It has happened.
So, Lance, we've challenged people to tune in. How can they do that?
Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that fine podcasts.
Bring us some listeners, expand this conversation. That is how we make things better. For the State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.